Hello everyone, welcome to the GS Booster Shot, your daily dose for GS preparations. Today happens to be the World Rhino Day, and to signify the same, the government of Assam has decided to burn about 2500 rhino horns today. And this is an initiative from the government of Assam towards busting the popular myths with respect to rhino horns' medicinal properties and its courage in the countries such as China and Vietnam. So, from environment's perspective, this happens to be an important topic, that is the wildlife conservation. And therefore, today, along with seeing the popular measures taken for rhino conservation, we'll also have a look at the legislations which are geared towards wildlife conservation. So, three important things that we are going to see today is the constitutional provisions for animal protection, the salient features of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, which is one of the main acts towards wildlife preservation of both flora and fauna. And lastly, we're going to see the important initiatives towards rhino conservation. So let us begin with our today's lecture. As you all know that the context have been provided to us by Indian Express's Today's Explained sections article, which has been talking about the initiative of government of Assam towards burning down these 2500 rhino horns. So it sends a loud and clear message to poachers and society at large that such items are of no value, neither monetary nor medicinal. Now, let us see what are the constitutional provisions with respect to wildlife conservation. So, most importantly, the constitutional amendment, 42nd constitutional amendment, brought down the subject of forests and protection of wild animals and birds from state list to concurrent list, thereby giving the power to central government to also legislate with respect to wildlife laws. Then, the fundamental duty under Article 51 AG also puts a responsibility on the citizens to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests and wildlife. Speaking of directive principle of state policies, under Article 48A, it mandates that the state shall also endeavour to protect and improve environment and safeguard forests and wildlife of the country. Thereby, our constitution imposes duty on the citizen and the state, both for conservation of environment. Then, now we'll see the salient features of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. This act happens to be very important for the purpose of preservation of flora and fauna of the country. So, chiefly there are 5 salient features that we are going to discuss. The first one is it prohibits hunting of animals which have been put in its schedule 1, 2, 3 and 4, with the exception that with the permission of the chief wildlife warden of the state, under 2 conditions the animals can be hunted. One is when these animals, the animals mentioned in the schedule, become harmful for the people, either they are man-eaters or they're harmful to the property. The second reason being when the animal has been infected with such a disease from which its recovery is not possible. So in this very case, we see that even the concept of euthanasia is applied to animals. Second, as I said that this act also covers provisions for the protection of flora. So it prohibits cutting and uprooting of specified plants in forests and protected areas. Again, the exception to this very thing is being that with the permission of the chief wildlife warden, you can do this for educational, scientific research or preservation in a herbarium. Besides this, the central government has also given a power to approve any of uprooting or cutting of plants in these specified and protected areas. Then, it gives the power to the governments for declaration of areas, specified areas in the country as wildlife sanctuary or national parks, and mandate rules for its protection also. Then, in order to fulfill the initiatives or the objectives of this very act, it mandates setting up of certain authorities and certain bodies. Let us look at all the bodies that this very act calls for. So there are chiefly 5 bodies that we'll see. The first is the National Board for Wildlife. So this happens to be the apex body. It is chaired by the Prime Minister and takes all the important decisions with respect to wildlife protection. So majorly, it approves all the projects in and around of protected areas. So if there has to be a project, construction project or industry or any such activity that has to be carried out in and around of such protected areas, the permission has to come from the central government, and comes from this very National Board of Wildlife. Then we have the State Board for Wildlife. It is chaired by the Chief Minister and advises the state government in selection of areas which can be designated as protected areas and management of the same. It also decides with respect to what sort of a conservation policy has to be adopted, whether locals are to be engaged or not, such things. Besides this, if there has to be any amendment to the schedule, there are various schedules as I told you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, 4. So if there has to be any amendment to these schedules, some species needs to be added or some species needs to be removed from these schedules, this very board recommends the amendment also. Coming to third body, which is the Central Zoo Authority. Now this body is chaired by the Union Environment Minister, and it has the job of recognizing various zoos and setting regulations for the management of these very zoos. Then the fourth body is National Tiger Conservation Authority. Again, this is chaired by the Union Finance Minister, and it can recommend for recognizing any area as tiger reserve. Lastly, we have the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. This bureau is tasked with combating organized wildlife crime in the country. With respect to organized wildlife crime, it is important for us to know that today illicit wildlife trade is pegged to be worth about $19 billion in the world. And from this very figure, we can understand the magnanimity of the problem, and this very bureau is tasked with handling the organized crime with respect to wildlife in India. The last salient feature is that it designates any hunted animal in the schedule, its ivory which is traded in India, either it is imported or produced in India only, any articles made of these very ivory, meat of these wildlife animals to be the property of the government, irrespective of whether you have paid it, your possession on it, you have purchased it from any other source. It is the government which is the owner of these very products. And as I've told you earlier only, that the government of Assam has decided to destroy these 2500 horns. So under this very act, the government has to take permission under section 339 subsection 3C from the chief wildlife warden to destroy any such property. So government of Assam has obtained this very permission. Now coming to rhino conservation, just like tiger conservation, rhino conservation has also been a very important project in India. The one-horned rhino is the a species which is today found only in India, and some of these rhinos are found in Nepal also. So one-horned rhinos are today basically based in the Brahmaputra Valley or in the Tarai region in Uttar Pradesh and between Nepal. So the major initiative was the Indian Rhino Vision 2020. So this has been an ambitious effort towards increase in rhino population, and it had targeted to have more than 3000 rhinoceros in India by 2020. So we have roughly achieved this target. Today there are about 2900 rhinos in the country, and this was a collaborative effort between the World Wildlife Fund, International Rhino Foundation, and the major entity from India's side in this very initiative was Assam's Forest Department. So today Assam happens to be the home of more than 67% of the population of world's horn rhinos. At the time that this initiative was started, Assam had about 91% of rhino population. With this conservation efforts, the population of rhinoceros was rehabilitated in other wildlife areas as well. So, because of this very initiative, in 2008, in Asia, the one-horned rhinoceros was the only species of endangered species of IUCN, which was then given the status of vulnerable species. Then, as far as the distribution of rhinoceros is concerned, as I've already told you, that they're found in the Brahmaputra Valley and the Terai region. So Chief Park and 3 states basically has this population. The first one and the most important one is Assam in Kaziranga National Park, Coimbatore Wildlife Sanctuary, Orang National Park, Manas National Park in Assam. So Manas National Park, with the relocation of rhinoceros in Manas National Park, only then this Manas National Park was categorized as one of the sites of World Heritage Sites. Then Jaldapara National Park, even Dibru-Shikhov National Park has certain population of rhinoceros. And in West Bengal, we have actually, this is Jalpadra and Gorumara National Park in West Bengal. And Dudhwa Tiger Reserve is the area in Uttar Pradesh, where, as I've mentioned you, it is found in Terai region. So it is Dudhwa Tiger Reserve in which the rhinoceros has been reintroduced. Now, as you can see in last prelims, we were asked about question with respect to the reproduction of elephants. From this very angle, we can today also talk about the reproduction cycle of rhinoceros. So the females become sexually mature around at the age of 5 to 7 years, whereas males get sexually matured at the age of 10. Breeding continues throughout the year. The gestation period is about 15 to 16 months. Gestation period is a period in which after the insemination, the female gives birth to the rhinoceros. The single offspring remains with the mother until the birth of next calf. This usually has a difference about 1 to 3 years. So this is all with respect to today's lecture. I hope you found it important, and should you have any doubts, feel free to put your doubts in the comment section. Besides this, the Indian Express's Explained section today also talked about the recent crisis, economic crisis, the impending economic crisis in China with respect to one of its major infrastructure giants on the verge of collapse. The same was covered up in another lecture by our economic faculty today morning. So feel free and do have a look at that very video also. Thank you and have a nice day.